Hey guys, what's going on? It's Adam, Science Tutor here, and today we're going to be talking about the trigeminal nerve, it's cranial nerve 5, and the different branches that are in it. So it's trigeminal. Tri means that there's 3 branches, and the one primarily we're going to be speaking about today is the ophthalmic branch. So ophthalmic branch, and they're all going to be listed as V1, V2, and V3. So we say V, but really it's 5. It's just easier to say V than 5-1, 5-2, 5-3. So it's V1, V2, and V3. V1 and V2, ophthalmic and maxillary, are going to be sensory, which is going to be afferent. And then mandibular is going to be mixed, but motor is for efferent. And like I said before, today we're going to be talking about the ophthalmic or V1 branch. So we're going to make a save vase chart. If you guys don't remember what that is, check out my video. I have a video that explains what it is. It's very important, and it's going to give us our components and what system our ophthalmic nerve arrives from. And after that, we're going to be talking about the branches off the ophthalmic nerve. So stay tuned. So we're going to have the vase chart. We're going to fill that out real quick. And what we're going to be looking for is, where is cranial nerve 5? Where does that lie? And then now that we know that ophthalmic is afferent, we can quickly eliminate the systems that it's not in. So we automatically can cross off our special somatic efferent because that one does not exist. But in reality, we could really cut off or drop off all the efferents. But I'm just going to make a point here showing you that cranial nerve 5 is in the special visceral efferent, along with it being a part of the general somatic afferent in the bottom left as well. So we could cut off all the rest though, because we know cranial nerve 5 does not belong there. Once again, if you guys are confused by this, check out my save vase chart. Makes finding the system and components really easy. So we see that SVE, special visceral efferent, is efferent, and ophthalmic nerve is afferent. Therefore, it can't be in that system. So we could cross that out too. That's going to be probably the mandibular branch off the trigeminal nerve. So that means our system in play has to be our general somatic afferent. Afferent is for sensory, and it has our cranial nerve 5. So it has our cranial nerve 5, V1, and V2. And it's sensory. So it's not going to be in our special somatic afferent one listed above either. But we found it. So general somatic afferent is the system or components of the ophthalmic nerve or ophthalmic branch. And we figured that out using deductive reasoning through the save vase chart, a very useful chart. So please check out that video. It's I'll post the link to that at the end of this video. So ophthalmic nerve. So ophthalmic nerve, we know that it's now part of the general somatic afferent system. It's all sensory, and it's going to be revolved around the eye. So you could think of, you see, as soon as you see OPT, think ophthalmologist, optometrist. That OPT is indicative that it's a part of the eye. So I drew out a pretty green eye. And then we're going to have that lacrimal gland in there. And then we're going to have the ethmoidal bones in the underside of the eye. So we're going to get that going. And when we're going to be talking about this, it's primarily the ophthalmic nerve is going to branch from the trigeminal nerve through here. And it's going to be right behind the eye. So we're going to talk about the different foramen and spaces that it can go through. And yeah, so cool. Let's finish drawing this up. And if you guys want, draw out this pathway while we're talking about it, because that is the best way to learn, essentially. So, and if you guys are able to draw this pathway out, you will be able to find it on a cadaver or anywhere else, or on the test sheet for sure. So the ophthalmic nerve, so before it branches out, it's going to have to go through a special area, a sinus, a cavernous sinus. So the cavernous sinus, it's going to go into the cavernous sinus, which sits right before the eye. And then it's going to have to go through a foramen as well. So the cavernous sinus and foramen before it splits. And it's going to split into 3 branches. So cranial nerve V1. And there's going to be this supra or superior orbital fissure. So you could call it supra or superior orbital fissure. And a fissure is similar to a foramen. It's just a gap where the nerve can go through. And usually other things are going through it, not just the nerve. So we have our superior orbital fissure. And then now we're going to branch out, and after it passes the superior orbital fissure, it's going to be now the frontal nerve. So the frontal nerve. And frontal nerve, you could think of this as supplying not just the eye, but the frontalis muscle, which is like your forehead muscle. And the frontal nerve is going to split into two, which we'll talk about in a bit. The lacrimal nerve is going to go to our lacrimal gland, which I told you is like the tear duct. And then we have the nasociliary nerve, which it has a few different branches, and that's going to primarily deal with the eye. And all these are dealing with the eye, but the nasociliary definitely more for the eye and the movement of the eye. So lacrimal nerve will go to lacrimal gland. However, keep in mind the lacrimal nerve does not provide the tears, and we're going to get to what provides the tears in just a moment. So on the frontal nerve, we're going to have a split. We're going to have the superior trochlear nerve, and then we're going to have also the superior orbital nerve, or supraorbital nerve, if you want to say that too. They're kind of interchangeable. Supraorbital nerve, and that's off the frontal nerve. And keep in mind the frontal nerve is going to be the biggest one, and then the rest of them are going to branch off pretty small around it. The supraorbital nerve is going to go through the supraorbital foramen. So the supraorbital foramen, so it's kind of named after one another. That makes the foramen and the fissures pretty easy, but not always, but more often than not. And then keep in mind we have the supraorbital and the superior trochlear. So if there's a superior or supra, that means we're going to have an inferior one as well. But where they will be depends, and where they're branched off of depends. So here off the nasociliary, we're going to have a couple different things. We're going to have the short ciliary, the long ciliary, and the infratrochlear. So like I just said, the superior trochlear nerve comes from the frontal nerve. However, the infratrochlear nerve comes from our nasociliary. And then off the nasociliary, we're also going to have our anterior and posterior ethmoidal nerves. So I'm going to draw those in just a sec. So we have our anterior and posterior ethmoidal nerves, and those sit directly behind the eye, supplying the ethmoid bones. And then in the middle, we're going to have our short ciliary nerve, and then on the end, we're going to have the long ciliary nerve, and there's actually multiple long ciliary nerves, but just for simplicity purposes, we're just going to draw one, and it's going to go right to our eye. So our long ciliary nerve. Then our short ciliary nerve is going to have a ciliary ganglion. So a ganglion is pretty cool because it allows us to bring parasympathetic fibers and presynaptic nerves along with us. So this sensory can bring additional nerves. It could provide parasympathetic fibers to the eye, because both of these are going to go to the eye. So we're going to have our cranial nerve 3. Our cranial nerve 3 is our oculomotor nerve, and our oculomotor nerve is going to be our pretty much how our eye is able to move. So that's going to go through the ciliary ganglion and accompany the short ciliary nerve and go directly to our eye, and it's going to carry parasympathetic fibers with it as well. So it's going to go right to the eye. And this is pretty much how our eye is able to move, because the oculomotor nerve is our motor sensation for our eye. So if you guys haven't seen my cranial nerve video, I highly suggest watch it. It's ways to remember the cranial nerves 1 through 12 and how not to forget them. It's pretty easy. So but it's more strict memorization at that point. So cranial nerve 3, which is our oculomotor nerve, it's our motor sensation for our eye. Now let's talk about the lacrimal nerve and why I said that the lacrimal nerve does not provide the tears for our pretty much our tear duct. So we're going to our tear duct. Why doesn't it supply the tears, or why can't we make tears from it? Well, it's sensory. So cranial nerve, we're going to need help from our cranial nerve V2, which is our maxillary nerve, and I'll branch off of the maxillary nerve is going to be our zygomatico temporal nerve, which is going to help supply our tears, or help bring the tears. And I know what you're thinking. Well, the cranial nerve V2 is also sensory, so how is it able to do this? Well, it's going to go through a ganglion and pick up parasympathetic fibers, which are going to allow us to have tears. So it's going to pick up parasympathetic fibers, and that will allow us to have the tears. So without the lacrimal nerve, if we get our lacrimal nerve severed, we can still produce tears. We just need our zygomatico-temporal nerve, which is carrying with it parasympathetic fibers. And we're going to get these parasympathetic fibers from the pterygopalatine ganglion. So I write it out wrong here at the beginning, but I'm going to fix it. So it's the pterygopalatine foramen, or ganglion, pterygopalatine ganglion. And that's what's going to supply the parasympathetic fibers, which are going to allow us to have tears. So once again, if we have our zygomatico-temporal nerve severed, we will not be able to produce tears. However, if we have our lacrimal nerve severed, we could still have tears. So it depends on where it's severed at and where it got hurt from. But if you're unable to make tears, that means you damaged your zygomatico-temporal nerve, because they're both sensory, so we need those parasympathetic fibers. So cool, that pretty much sums up the ophthalmic nerve, or the branch off our trigeminal nerve, and it primarily focuses on the eye and above. So this section of the face here, and it's not so bad. Main one is the frontal nerve, and then we have a lot of little other ones. Don't be too confused by the ganglion. That just allows us to put more action where we have only sensory. But cool, thank you all for watching.